special guest this evening is Maria Wheatley. And Maria is a second-generation dowser who was taught by European master dowsers and Chinese geomants. Maria is a leading authority on geodetic, earth energies, and ley lines. Maria is an accomplished author of books on sacred sites and dowsing. She has continued her late father's dowsing research into the esoteric designs, canons of prehistoric sites, Druidic ceremonial enclosures, and the Knights Templar churches and cathedrals. Maria has studied Neolithic Britain and Bronze Age prehistory with the University of Bath and alongside other professionals. And Maria combines her knowledge of archaeology and earth energies with state-of-the-art equipment to locate, detect, and interpret the hidden frequencies that the earth emits. Her findings challenge our understanding of sacred sites. Maria has also written holistic diploma courses for private colleges, and she runs, she runs esotericcollege.com, which offers certificated courses on holistic subjects, including past life regression, astrology, tarot, and dowsing. And Maria teaches advanced dowsing techniques, which are not taught anywhere else in the world, and Celtic Feng Shui, which is very interesting. And you can reach her at Maria Wheatley at AOL.com, and we'll get her, I believe she has www.the I can't even speak tonight, experience.co.uk. And of course, her books are available on Amazon.com. And please welcome Maria to the show this evening. Hello there, Maria.
Hi, Solaris. Thanks for having me on the show.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you on tonight. Thank you for joining us. I know it's very, very early for you over there in the UK, so thank you so much for joining us. It's quite the honor to have you on tonight. So let everybody know what you've been up to as of recent.
Yes, well, I've been doing some wonderful tours and visiting some fantastic ancient sites in countries like Sardinia, which is in the Mediterranean, that has some very unusual temple spaces. And I've been to places like Malta. I've been helping out and co-hosting a forthcoming show that should be released on May the 14th called Megalithic Odyssey. And I've been writing some books as well. So it's been quite busy and quite fun.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. Can you fill us in a little bit on the Malta experience and what you were investigating over there?
Yes, Malta is a wonderful island. It's of limestone, the geology there. So their ancient sites are very beautifully carved because limestone is quite a carvable material. So we were looking at the different types of earth energies there. What inspires a country to build a particular monument? And the location is always very important. It's also land of the goddess. It's a very, very feminine energy there that is very beautiful, and some of their ancient sites go deep in the ground, called the hypogeum there. So it's a very unusual place, whereas when we compare some places in Malta to England, you have the underground places of Malta and you have open air places such as like Stonehenge and Avebury over here. And in Sardinia they have even more unusual monuments, really quintessentially there, which are like huge domed areas, and they're called nuraghi.
How interesting. And did you do a lot of dowsing over there, or?
I always do dowsing, Solaris. I've always got a dowsing rod in my purse.
Awesome. So you do the rods. That's how you're doing your dowsing.
I use rods and pendulum and my hands and my body all to interpret the different types of energy, because the way I was taught by Chinese geomants is long before you get a dowsing rod out to determine what type of earth energy you're interacting with, is to walk it and feel it. So you learn the different frequencies through your body. So if I was interpreting a house or doing a house clearing, for example, I'd walk the house and then I'd feel the energies. Then I'd get my dowsing rod out to confirm that which I felt.
Mm-hmm. That makes perfect sense to me. And why don't you explain to our listeners what a second generation dowser actually is? And obviously they probably know, but let's go into details about it.
Well, dowsing is an ancient art. I mean, we all kind of get familiar with it through water divining, and we imagine people going to find water sources, and that's one aspect of dowsing. Dowsing really is finding the invisible and making it visible. So it could be underground water, it could be pipes, storage pipes, it could be earth energies, it could be ley lines, it could be oil, it could be anything really. And the art of dowsing with L rods is literally, you can ask the dowsing rods, is there any underground water in this house? And you set up information dowsing, and your dowsing rod would go yes or no. And that's called information dowsing. So you literally ask the rods, is there any earth energies in this house that I'm living in? Is there any underground water? Yes, no. And then you use what's called directional dowsing. You ask the dowsing rod to show you the direction of whatever it is you want to find. And the dowsing rod will waver and it will point to a particular direction. And then you just follow it, and the rods will go to found, which is often crossed rods, or the rod will come towards your body or go away from your body. And that's basically saying, I found it.
I love that.
That's the eureka moment. And then you know what you're dealing with, what type of energy, you've located it, and you found it. So those simple principles, information dowsing, directional dowsing, and tracking, following something, that's dowsing. It's easy and anyone can do it.
I love it. I think it's fabulous. Yeah, I have some dowsing rods as well. And I was going to ask you, do you use in the old days, they used to use the twigs. Do you use anything like that in the past? Have you worked with that?
I have used a traditional Y hazel rod to find underground water, and I had it for years actually. And I have got this lovely old seat. It's like an old oak chair in my house, and my friend got a little bit tipsy one evening and sat on it.
Oh wow!
So I've never replaced it. But traditionally, you use windswept twigs. You never pick from the tree. You have to look for something that's been deposited by the tree.
Mm-hmm. That makes perfect sense. I know my grandmother used to do a lot of dowsing too, and she used to find oil wells in Texas and make a lot of people rich. So yeah, it definitely works. There's no doubt. Have you ever looked for burial sites or anything like that? I know that you can actually find skeletons.
Absolutely. I've used dowsing to locate very unusual skulls in the Stonehenge area, like the elongated skulls I
Mm-hmm.
found through dowsing. And I was just looking at a map, and I often ask the land or a map, what's your story? What do you want me to find? So I allow the land to guide me rather than saying, asking the question, can I find something? I say to the land, what can I find? And I'm often guided to a particular monument or a particular place.
That's fascinating. That's just incredible. Now, your father also was a master dowser, right?
Yes, I mean, and my daughter even today, she kind of likes dowsing, and she prefers tarot as well. So she's 21 now. She's called Raven.
Oh, that's
And
wonderful. All right. Can't
yeah,
have too many of those around. Oh,
no, she's very proud of her name actually.
that's wonderful. Yeah, so it's in the family for sure.
Yes, but you don't definitely doesn't have to be in the family. Anyone and everyone can douse and learn any esoteric and mystical art. It just takes a little bit of focus and a little bit of time. So I believe that the more that we kind of use these skills like dowsing of our ancient ancestors old, then we're living in harmony with the earth. We're trying to understand and reconnect with the earth, because a lot of people have a disconnect with the earth these days.
Mhm, they certainly do, and it seems to me like there's almost like a too much technology versus just integrating with nature like we used to. So, yeah, I love the work you're doing. It's fascinating to me, and it just feels so right. So, what got you interested in actually going or investigating the sacred sites and actually using the dowsing rods to connect in with ley lines and such?
Well, really, it was my late father. He used to do dowsing tours, and he investigated a lot of the ancient sites and Knights Templar churches, and I used to go along because I just loved places like Avebury, like Stonehenge, and when I was about 12 or so, my family moved to Pennsylvania near Valley Forge. So I've spent some time in America, and we went to visit ancient sites there like Cahokia, Serpent Mound,
Oh
and
wow.
Fort Ancients.
Hmm.
So I really have a feel. I've always kind of connected to the American land as well. I think you live in a very special place that had huge monuments. I mean, some of the largest mounds and henges in the world are in America.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly. Well, and where you're at too, you're in quite a power spot. There's no doubt about that one, for sure. So that's just fascinating to me. So what is your connection to the Knights Templar? Or what was your father's connection to that? Was he just interested, or is it a heritage connection there?
No, he was interested in investigating the for example, if you go back to the Neolithic Stone Age, let's say about 5,000 years, 4,500 years ago, they used the motif of the circle. The circle was sacred to them. It's sacred to Druidism even today. One casts a circle to honor a spirit of place and the ancestors and the gods of old. So that was very much a circle motif. When it came to the Knights Templar, for example, they continued the circular motif, but then the early medieval Masons created the cross. So they looked not for the underground water that's a special type of underground water that is born within the womb of the earth that creates a circular and spiral pattern to site the stone circles upon. The Knights Templar would look for an energy line. It could be an underground stream or it could be a ley that goes, say, near enough east to west, and then one that has it crossing north to south, and that creates a cross, the geo cross in the land, and that's sanctified where the church or cathedral would be built upon. So beneath the foundations of the church, you have an unseen cross of energy in the land.
Very, very interesting. So always about a power spot. There's no doubt about that.
Absolutely. And the start of the church or the altar of the church would be on the crossing point of the underground streams or the leys or the under earth currents, whatever they were looking for in that particular landscape.
That's fascinating. Well, I know nowadays the military tends to stake power spots, so it's always getting overlaid. It seems like a lot of those areas that generate a lot of energy usually get staked out to some degree by powerful groups of people.
Absolutely. There's the same in every country. So, for example, Stonehenge, surrounded by, military establishment after military establishment. Some of the barracks there, some of the kind of technological places there are connected to the ley systems, connected to the mounds, without a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah, that's interesting. Is there always a ley line connected to a sacred site, or have you ever come across something that doesn't have any connection at all?
Most do. I mean, you do have leys are very powerful, but a ley system is even more powerful than a ley. So if we imagine you have a straight line connecting ancient site after ancient site, that's your archetypal ley. And quite often on some very major leys, you have earth currents entwining them. One is said to be male and one is said to be female. So they entwine that ley in a caduceus-like style. Those earth currents are very, very powerful. And it's almost like the ley anchors those energies into the land, into the monuments, because the two currents that entwine the ley are never more than 5 miles apart. That's a very powerful ley system. They're the ones our ancient ancestors would put the major power points on.
That's fascinating. It's so fascinating. My goodness. And when you're talking about the male and the female, do they go in different directions? It sounds like one would go clockwise and one would go counterclockwise.
Well, not necessarily. What happens is if you imagine them as rivers of energy flowing through the land, and some of them go globally, actually. So these are like rivers of energy that just continually flow, but they're flowing like sort of one way and the other at the same time. So they're creating a dynamic sort of almost not like a vortex like you get in Sedona, but like a really strong current that goes against it. And we've tested those out, actually. We've put some copper probes into these earth currents, and they have amazing frequencies. So one's called Mary. You have a ley system. It's called the St. Michael ley, and it has two earth currents entwining it that are called Mary and Michael. And they were called Mary and Michael because every 5 or so kilometers you had a church dedicated to Mary Magdalene or the Virgin Mary on the Mary current flowing through the land, and likewise for the Michael current.
That's
and
great.
when we Yeah. I mean, so the early Christian Masons were following the ancient pagan traditions because flowing through their churches are these wonderful earth currents, imbuing the site with unseen power. And giving it a quality, a spirit of place that is divine. So it's very, very beautiful, these earth currents flowing through the churches. And when we tested the frequency of the Mary current at Avebury, which is the largest stone circle in the world, we found different frequencies, but in the center of that line, we found the frequency of 25 hertz. And Dr. Sam, who investigates the Bosnian pyramids, informed me at one lecture that 25 hertz is the frequency of levitation. So it could be that these earth currents pinpointed where the ancient sites were going to be, because maybe they could move the stones with ease along these earth currents. Is yet to be established, but it's certainly a theoretical possibility.
Oh, absolutely. That's fascinating. I had not heard that the 25 hertz is the frequency of levitation.
According to Dr. Sam, and I just noticed that these earth currents in our independent studies were coming up with that frequency time and time again in the near center of that line. So I think the ancients were fully aware of the earth frequencies, and they were fully aware of how to move stone. Because when I studied archaeology, I remember the archaeologists saying, oh, it's so difficult to move stone. And I said, well, no, not in the ancient world, because they were moving stone all of the time, whether they were building pyramids or stone circles. It wasn't an issue to them. We think it was.
Interesting. This is fascinating. So I'm looking at the frequency in general here. So what is generating the frequency itself? Is it the way the lines are laid out? That's what's generating the frequency, or is it something else connecting in and actually broadcasting it?
It's not the lay itself. It's the earth currents that entwine in it that have the 25 hertz. Okay. Which is a natural, it's believed, nobody really fully knows Solaris, so it's a theory, but the theory is that the Earth's magnetic core, or the crystal center within, the middle of the Earth, generates an electromagnetic field. This electromagnetic field can flow like rivers in places, just like a surface river, and that river that generates, the river of energy that generates a 25 hertz.
That's fascinating. That's incredible. I love your knowledge. You really blow me away. You're brilliant. You really are. I'm very impressed with you, I must say. And can these currents at some point, can they ever be broken at all? I know that there's a lot of other types of covert technology that can actually run scrambling transmissions and signals. And, we have all kinds of technologies that really cause problems with the electromagnetic field in general. So are these things, can they be hijacked is my question, really, in your opinion?
That's a really good question. And yes, I think they can. I think anything can be manipulated, can't it, really? For good or for bad. I mean, the ancient Chinese, they developed a whole science to explain these earth currents and leys, and they called it, Feng Shui, or we call it geomancy over here. And they would say, even if you built a road across one of the dragon lines, as they called it, Long Mei, the power in the land, if a road cut across one, that would bring bad luck, bad feng shui. And I think, the military establishments, they do tap into these sources for their own agendas. So you can manipulate something, but at the same time, you can add in your own energy to these, your own love, your own understanding. Some of these energy lines are also flow in part with underground streams, and underground streams are water, and water has memory. So you can tap into these energy systems like the Earth's Akashic records. We can work with these energies in many, many ways.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's all energy and consciousness, if you ask me. It's quite fascinating, really. I love the way you describe this information tonight. I'm sure we'll have a lot of questions in the chat room, but it's very interesting. How would you define a ley line insofar as, is there a correlation between the lines of the Earth and the star maps?
Yes, well, over here, how we define leys goes back to the grandfather of leys called Alfred Watkins. And he said, wherever you have a straight line and you have 5 ancient sites lined upon it, that decrees a ley. The research over here, going back to the 1930s, has noticed that when you have solitary standing stones, not part of a stone circle, just one in the landscape, let's say, some leys seem to generate from that standing stone, marking its entrance, if you will, into the world. And it could go for, say, 5 or 10 miles and then terminate at the next standing stone. Some leys can be much longer, and they can go on for like 300 miles. John Michel, who studied leys very, very in depth, noticed that the major, well-documented ley of the UK, called the St. Michael ley, is orientated precisely to the rising Beltane sun. That's the May the 1st sunrise, very sacred in the Druid and witch calendar. And it also lined precisely to the set in Samhain or Halloween's sunset. So he claimed that the ancients manipulated some lines to face these sunrises. So some of them are manipulated lines facing solar and lunar and stellar events, and some are just natural lines. The ancient Druids of this landscape said there's 12 mighty circles that encompass the earth, because if you project a straight line around the world, it becomes a circle. So there's many different types of leys. Some are short, some are long, some are quite to get confused with grid lines, because we've got massive grid systems that encompass the earth. So some people think they're grid systems. There's lots of different schools of thought, really.
It's fascinating, I must say. It's a nice reminder having you on tonight, because we tend to forget what's here on this in this world we walk on. The energy signatures that are here, and all of this beautiful design work that's behind the scenes that most people don't pay attention to.
Well, exactly. This is what I really would like to see for the future, is that people looking at the seen and the unseen. I mean, you can have a beautiful topographical landscape, which is the seen, but then have the unseen. And if we have new house builds or even old house builds, look at the energies that you are living with. Some can be very beneficial, some can be detrimental. For example, living on the crossing point of the Curry Net, and the Curry Net is a massive grid system that encompasses the earth, discovered by Dr. Manfred Curry back in the 1950s. And he noticed that where he took blood samples from, because he was a doctor, the blood thickness would vary from where in his practice he took that blood from. After much investigation, he realized it was down to the earth grid, which was named after him, the Curry Net. And the crossing points of those, if they're in the house and you're interacting with it for long periods, like your bed's above it, for example, is detrimental to your house. And you had a fantastic researcher in the 80s called Kathy Batchelor, and she realized that certain houses in Germany, where she focused her research on because she was German, she called them cancer houses, because she noticed that time and time again, if you live above these energies, you're more prone to what is in your DNA system. It could be a stroke, it could be cancer, it could be a heart attack. So they did a massive survey of over 8,000 people and found categorically that if you remove yourself from geopathic stress, as it's called in its collective name, negative toxic earth energy, you will live longer and healthier. So just by moving your bed in your home, could give you a longer life. And we can empower ourselves by doing this, because it's not difficult to douse these energy lines. It really isn't.
And what about the regular, dirty electricity that, the power lines are everywhere, especially here. What do you do with that situation where you really can't run away from the power lines per se? But is there a solution to that at all?
Yes, I mean, it's not ideal to live above, but, sometimes we have no choice, do we? And we live amid these energies. Then you really need to look for different types of what's called a diffuser, an electromagnetic diffuser to put in your home to help diffuse these energies. And there's many on the market, and do your own research on Google and have a look. I mean, a lot of people like copper devices, some like orgonite devices. I mean, there's many on the markets, but we can live in harmony with all of this. Wherever you are, you can live in harmony with the earth and with other energies besides.
I totally agree. And it really, what it boils down to is frequency. It's all about frequency once again, and how it operates and functions and how it modulates. It's really fascinating, isn't it?
Well, absolutely. And if we look at, like foam masts and electrical cables, they feed the curry nets. So if you do live by pylons or, any type of transmitter, that will enhance the curry net and other nets that encompass the earth. So it's very important to have a look at that and just do a little bit of the art of placement, as we say. Move offices, move beds a bit, move your TV off the lines, and it will make them more neutral.
Right, exactly. And I did want to talk a little bit about your Celtic Feng Shui. That's fascinating. So why don't you give a description of how this operates?
Well, because I was brought up with understanding the Eastern way of divining energies and the Western way of divining earth energies, and I also qualified in Feng Shui many years ago with some Chinese geomants. I decided to combine the both because I love the art of placement in the traditional Chinese way, but it seemed a disconnect on the Celtic lands that I live upon. So what I put together was the ancient Druids had an eightfold year, so which was focused on the seasons, Mother Earth, and all of the change in dynamics in one year. So the time would begin at the vernal equinox, which is springtime, and when new life is fed in, and it goes through the 8 sacred festival dates. So I apply that to the home as much as the Chinese art of placement. So, for example, how would I do that? So the east in my home, for example, would represent the spring equinox and all of that energy of new life, new beginnings. So it's about looking at the natural earth cycle in your own home and honoring that and living in harmony with a little mini year in your home that equates and equals what Mother Nature is doing outside of your home.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that makes so much sense. Yeah, I like that Celtic Feng Shui. I haven't heard of that before, so that's quite interesting to me.
No, I've pioneered it actually. So you can activate each sector at those times of the year to just honor the different changes of the seasons, which again it creates a connection. What that is really doing, it's making a connection with you and the earth and the cycles. Your body flows with the cycles of life, doesn't it? You put on jumpers in the winter, but let's think of our home as living. The ancient Druids saw everything as living and breathing. So our home is alive. Our home is being influenced by the change in seasons too. And it's about honoring the life force of your home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So when you see trees outside of a property, say they're dying or they're not doing quite well, do you think that has something to do with the energetic signature of the property itself?
Yes, definitely. I mean, sometimes it can be down just to the wrong plant is planted in the wrong subsoils, but
Mm-hmm.
let's take that out of the way. Yes, certain trees love different types of energies. So, for example, underground water, if I had my geomancer's eye on, I would be looking around the landscape. I'd be looking for oak trees, yew trees, apple trees, hazel trees, all of those types of trees that had medicinal power to the ancient Druid and Celtic peoples of Europe. They grow on very positive underground water, for example. So you can look for the strength and the energies in the land just by trees and nature. And the trees that kind of do have difficulty living above some types of energies, you need to bring those into harmony again with living on the land. And you can do that by color frequency. So, for example, when we talk about leys, we think about a straight line connecting ancient sites. Of course we do. That's what a ley is. But a ley is full of electromagnetic energy and electromagnetic colors. So you have lots of different colors of the rainbow and unseen colors in energy lines like negative green, ultraviolet, ultra white, infra black. You have all of these colors. And if a tree or something is not being adversely affected, you can start to communicate to the earth energies and the ley by asking what color frequency can heal from that energy line the tree itself. So you don't ever need to move leys. You don't need to shift them around like the old style geomancers used to do. You can live in harmony just by getting the color frequency that the tree or a living organism needs to live in harmony with that energy. It's a beautiful way. It's a very old Chinese Celtic way of living in harmony with the earth. Then you had many years ago in the 1930s a belief system in dowsing. We need to shift an energy line. You've got to get it out of your house. You've got to do this. You've got to do that. You've got to manipulate Mother Earth. But I think you don't need to do that. You need to just listen to the earth and gently appreciate it and work with it, not against it.
That makes perfect sense to me. I like the idea of the color healing too. A lot of the time people do forget about these things. There's no doubt about that. And I don't know about you, but where we are, there's a lot to deal with chemtrails and things like that, which kind of block the beauty of the energetic signature of the sun and all the energies, coming through. So that to me kind of correlates insofar as the health of the world and what we're dealing with right now. But I like the idea that you're actually nurturing this world. And I think that part of that has been lost on so many levels for a lot of people. So once again, I appreciate this work that you're putting out to the masses.
We have our own issues with chemtrails, and I wrote a book about sort of 10 or so years ago called Avery, Sun, Moon and Earth Energies. It was a beautiful exploration of ancient sites to do with different types of earth energies. And do you know what? If I took some of the sunset shots that I have in my book, I wouldn't be able to do that these days because the chemtrails gather in the sunset sector and just block out the sunset with rays. So it is an issue. It's a worldwide issue that needs to be addressed. And thankfully, like yourself and other researchers, bring this to our attention.
Yeah, it's really critical. To me, I know it fuels the light body and the cells and the atoms, and it's fuel for the DNA as well. So, yeah, there's a lot going on a multi-dimensional level, a multiversal level. But that's another thing I was going to ask you about, too. Most people perceive the world as a very linear kind of world, but we're really dealing in a very multidimensional world, which has many layers to it. So as you look at these layers of what you've created or what you've investigated with the ley lines, what else? I mean, it must take its own formula on a multidimensional level as well, in other dimensions and frequencies.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we're seeing a three-dimensional aspect, aren't we, with which what we're living amid, and all of these earth energies and Gaia herself. She acts on a different time level, and then the fourth dimension, and the lines that a lot of researchers feel that they can change and they grow up in frequency. The higher the dimension, the higher the frequency, and the more light that they have, and they go from like all of the earth colors to ultraviolet on different dimensional levels. So it is really, really fascinating, that the Earth has a living system, and just like your aura, we have our auras around us. Gaia has that as well, that are very, very high frequency, that it is believed reaches out to the other members of the solar system itself, and everything is connected in this web of life. It's very, very beautiful, and I think we can work with these energies on lots of different levels as well.
I agree. Yeah, it's like a universal harmonic in frequency. It's so beautiful when you look at it on that level of consciousness in general, in my opinion, anyway. And I was going to ask, we talked a little bit about the vortexes and portals. How often do they actually connect in with any type of ley line activity, or is that just something that's an anomalous happening that just transpires once in a while with vortexes and such?
Well, over here, it does seem, where you get crossing points, you can have vortex energy or a kind of portal opening, and something they're dimensional time opening areas. And sometimes they can be completely independent of themselves and just be a kind of vortex there. Stonehenge has a very, very powerful vortex portal there. It's probably why all the military are surrounding it. Lots of people have had time slips there, and they've experienced strange things. It's a very, very strong portal entrance.
Do you get to still go in there, or is it kind of manipulated right now? As far as can you just walk in and kind of take a tour by yourself, or?
Unfortunately not. In office opening times, let's say from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. in the summer, sometimes 6 o'clock with light evenings, you have to go round the outside on a guided tour. But you can buy private space. So tour companies, and anybody can do this actually. You just go onto English Heritage website and get private access for Stonehenge, and you pay 36 English pounds. Then you can have a slot that is out of office hours. So for example, early in the morning or late in the evening, you can buy your time to go into Stonehenge. But when Stonehenge came into its power back in 2010, preceding 2012, it was really coming into its power. And I know this because I've been interacting with it since the late 80s, and something shifted, and it was really releasing a lot of energy that was switching people on quite quickly just by being around the stones. That's when the stone touching ban came in, and you couldn't even touch the stones, and you still can't now, which is against, our rights. That's our ancestral monument. It was given to the English people. It is ours. And when they say, it's dangerous to the stones, half the stones at Stonehenge were concreted in the 1920s by Colonel Hawley, a military man, and later by Professor Richard Atkinson. So that you could touch them as much as you want.
Right.
They're not going to shift. They're not going to move. So that argument is just absolutely stupid.
Oh, I would get so annoyed with the touching ban. Oh man, are they roped off? I mean, can you kind of sneak, or would you get in trouble?
Well, yes, they have security 24
Oh,
hours a day around Stonehenge. But you can go to other stone circles. We have 900 stone circles alone in the British Isles that have survived, from the Neolithic period 5,000 years ago. And you've got places like Avebury, and in the north of England, you have very complete stone circles, which haven't really been that manipulated or the stones set upright and concreted in, and they're called Castlereagh and Swinside, and they're in a mountainous area in the north of England, and they are wonderful. And because they're hardly sort of written about or spoken about, because when we think of stone circles, we think of Stonehenge and Avebury and the rollright stones of the south of England. The north has a magical set of stone circles, and they're near complete. One stone circle in Cumbria alone has near enough every single stone intact. So when you go in there, you are going into a stone circle very similar to your ancient ancestors. And that has immense power. Whereas even though Stonehenge and Avebury have absolute immense power, they have been a little bit of a facelift in a way, because the stones that have been pushed over or buried in the medieval period were set upright and concreted in. So I think, that we have many stone circles across the world as well, not just in the UK.
It's really fascinating when you think about it on a global scale. So who actually built Stonehenge? Which ancestral bloodline built Stonehenge?
Well, Stonehenge took 1,000 years to complete. It was a generation after generation. So Stonehenge, if we use the orthodox timeline set by archaeologists, which I think is probably a little bit out, but if we use that as a yardstick, so to speak, it began in 3100 BC. That's when it was started to be constructed. Phase one of Stonehenge was 56 blue stones in a massive stone circle surrounded by a henge, which is a ditch and a bank. So that was phase one Stonehenge. Then about 500 years later, the Stonehenge that we're all familiar with was built by the Bronze Age people. And then in 1500 BC, they built what's called the X and Y holes around the side of Stonehenge. So all of that time period, they were constantly tweaking and adding to Stonehenge. It was almost a continuation. And then round about 1500 BC, the stone building phase, the megalithic builders, they stopped all of their building program across Europe in 1500 BC. Then it went to the Celtic peoples that changed the monumental building and started to build these ceremonial centres on tops of hills. So who did build the first phase of Stonehenge? I think, in my opinion, with my research, it was the elongated people that had elongated skulls that have been found, and I rediscovered them by looking into, old archaeological texts and newspapers and things like that, and visiting museums and visiting universities. And I found that their skulls were very different to our round skulls. And I think they were the ones that initiated phase one of Stonehenge and built the long barrows surrounding Stonehenge.
It makes a lot of sense to me. And those that were with the elongated skulls, now a lot of speculation or people saying that literally they were another species, perhaps another alien race. Do you think they were just a different kind of human, so to speak, or what do you think?
I would love to see some proper DNA testing. I would
Mm,
love to see in England that this is done, because they could be a different race, they could be star seeded, they could be a different type of human. We simply don't know. But this is our past. We need to explore this, and I am about to put in a request to a university to have a DNA testing done on at least two of the skulls that probably have their DNA a little bit more intact through the teeth, by drilling in. So we
mm,
do need to investigate this, and it could change our whole culture if they were, even if they were a different race, and
mm.
if even if they were off planet, it would change the way that we think about our ancient past, and that needs to be known. It's a part of us, really. It's our
Yeah.
history.
Absolutely. Well, there's been so much censorship with that sort of thing, even from the giants and everything else. And we've seen Smithsonian do that here, so it's no surprise that they try to censor information or skew it to some degree. But I'm really glad to know that you're actually going forward with the DNA testing with the skulls. I think that's going to be very powerful if they can get real information out of that.
I've requested that. Whether that request is received is
I
is
hope
another
so.
thing.
Surround the
You
energy for
know,
that one. No, it's great. I'm still getting back to that part where you can't touch the Stonehenge. That kind of really bugs me because you know how vibration affects DNA in your own signature, the resonance effect. So very interesting.
absolutely.
They know why the people can't touch it.
Yeah, yeah. There's another stone circle I took some American authors to about sort of 2 or 3 weeks ago. It's called Stanton Drew in Somerset in England. It's the second largest stone circle in the world, and it's very beautiful, like a pink colour stone. So
Hmm.
very different to Stonehenge and Avebury. It has this beautiful pink hue because it's got rich in iron deposits, which makes its electromagnetic energy field even stronger.
Hmm.
And we were walking down the old avenue together, and I suddenly stopped and I thought, wow, this stone is emitting a heat energy haze field all around it. And I just stood there because these people were quite sensitive, and they work with energy like yourself on different levels. And they just went into the field and they said, this is the warmth, this is the heat. We are actually feeling the energy come right towards us. Stanton Drew, hardly anybody visits there, and it is a power place. And you can literally walk in and out of the energy field. And if you imagine you're walking down an avenue of stones, one was emitting warm energy, the other cool, one warm, one cool. It was almost like these different temperatures were going right into your auric energy field, and very, very uplifting. I felt really uplifted, and I felt that I had been given some ancestral knowledge. I haven't made sense of it yet.
Oh, I bet.
but
Yeah.
but I definitely, received something, and they received something. And what we've been working with the ancient sites on one level is because of the deep healing underground water there, and the earth is made up of water, as we know, and we're made up of 75% or more water in our bodies. We're using the underground water to work with, to cleanse and refresh our own body water. And it seems a very natural process to do amid a stone circle.
It's very sacred. It strikes me as a very healing area, which you were talking about, spontaneous healing almost.
Yeah, and again, when we tested some of these frequencies out, they are definitely healing frequencies.
Hmm.
There was a great test done by a chap going back into the early 1990s called Robert Beck, and he looked at all different types of energy workers, whether they were doing Reiki, faith healing, dowsing, whatever. And he monitored the brain frequencies, and also, the person receiving the healing was set up so you could see what their brain was doing, if you will, their brain waves. And it seemed that the 7 hertz frequency, roughly around the Schumann resonance, whenever somebody had the dowsing moment, I found my underground water, in your case, the oil wells
Hmm.
in Texas of your ancestors, and it was
Hmm.
always around the 7 hertz frequency. And the healing, when somebody was given Reiki and receiving the Reiki treatment, was all done around that divine 7 hertz frequency, which is our relaxed alpha brainwave mode. So that was discovered. So you always have that in part in a special place within a stone circle. So it has a healing area, if you like.
Hmm. How sacred is that? That's incredible. So, what type of instruments do you use to measure the frequencies?
Well, I have a team. I don't do that
Okay.
personally. They have. I work with a person called David Webb. He's an engineer, and Rodney Hale, and they have used all different types of electromagnetic sensing equipment. We've used Geiger counters. Rodney Hale devised. He's worked with other top authors like Andy Collins
Mhm.
and Paul Devereaux, and he uses copper probes set into a laptop with a spectrum analyzer to see
Nice.
about all the different frequencies going on. So then he analyzes it, because the problem is where we have so much e-smog, electromagnetic smog from our smartphones and from, lots of different devices,
Hmm.
you have to take out all of the man-made signals.
Right.
So you start off with like something looking black on a laptop, and then you take out the man-made signals and you look for anomalous signals, and they use control areas as well to see if the signals are everywhere or just in these places. So it's done quite scientifically, and I'm really grateful that I met up with these very learned gentlemen to really have a look at earth energies, because I just wanted, some people need proof, some people don't need proof, they're intuitive, they understand the harmonics of the land, but
Hmm.
some people, they have to have that scientific proof, or you're just a dowser, you're just a sensitive. So I wanted to show the left-brained members of our community
Hmm.
that there's something very special about these ancient sites
Oh,
and the
absolutely.
stones.
Yeah, I totally agree. I do like the spectrum analysis. That's very, very interesting right there. And there's so many man-made signals, and I'm wondering, is there a lot of pollution over there insofar as interference transmissions connected to these sites? Are they around a lot of, you know, power spots? I mean, not power spots, but man-made stuff. Man-made
That's a
that's coming
really
out.
good question. It really is, because what David Webb discovered at the Rollright Stones, and the Rollright Stones are a beautiful stone circle set in Oxfordshire in the UK, quite close to Stratford upon Avon, which is famous for Shakespeare wrote his plays and lived there. So it's a very beautiful part of the English countryside. And David set up some tests there, and what he found was stones emit energy in particular manners. And I've discussed this a lot on the radio. If you plug a standing stone into an earth current, a ley, whatever, underground water, it starts to behave and transmit energy in a particular manner by literally absorbing that earth energy and changing it into aerial energy that goes across the landscape, yeah,
Hmm.
which I've always likened to a Wi-Fi network. No wires there in the Neolithic.
Right.
They were just transmitting it. And what David did, he started to analyze the frequencies and found that the standing stones were not just emitting the natural harmonic earth energy, which is a positive frequency that irrigates the surrounding landscape with those wonderful harmonics, but we're starting to transmit the man-made signals, and that is not good.
Hmm.
So I really do feel, I ask people now, yeah, we all have our smartphone. I do, I'm not going to be a hypocrite here, but I do try to switch them off, when I enter these sacred spaces now, so that the frequencies that we interact with are divine and not man-made.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree with that. Well, one of these days we'll have a conversation with my background with covert technology because they use a lot of interconnected artificial intelligence programs, and those can get really nasty because they hijack the electromagnetic field and the aura in the body. So, yeah, there's so many things out there that can run interference. But when push comes to shove, I really think that the Earth and the galactic energies that are constantly bombarding this world really do blow out all that debris to some degree.
Yes, I certainly like to think so. And I think with the energy work that a lot of people do around these ancient sites contributes to the Earth's health and well-being as well.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. So, how did you get involved in the crop circles?
Crop circles, I suppose I live in the heart of crop circle country.
Mm-hmm.
So just down the road from where I live, you have the famous East Field, where a lot of the crop circles appeared back in the early 90s. You do get an awful lot of hoaxes these days,
Mm-hmm.
but you do get some genuine ones as well. So they seem to manifest the genuine ones around ancient sites, on energy lines, on earth currents, on leys. So there was an intimate association with some of the early crop circles, especially positioning themselves on energy lines, and is interestingly enough as well on deep underground water aquifers as well. So it's attracted to energy and especially water. One of our largest aquifers in this area is in a place called White Sheet Hill in Mere, and even today you get some crop circles there.
That's fascinating. So there are actually legitimate crop circles.
There are a lot of man-made ones for sure, but you do get the odd genuine one. I know people that research them. I have an interest in them, but I don't research them because my forte is stone circles. But the researchers that I do know, they do say, there's a lot of hoax, as if the whole thing was hijacked to make it look a bit silly and a bit hoaxy, a bit like the UFO community has to suffer its hoaxes, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. That kind of reminds me of almost like they're doing some kind of a damage control, to create so much chaos that people have to really look between the spaces to find the truth.
Exactly. That's wonderfully put, and I'm in full agreement with that.
Yeah, it's interesting. So you obviously have gone into these quote unquote crop circles. What do you feel when you do go in there?
What I feel when I go into some of the genuine crop circles is you do feel an energy field. You really do. And I think about 10 years ago, the experience was probably a lot better because the corn was longer and more natural, and Monsanto didn't drip it in Roundup. So that I feel that when I go into some of the more modern crop circles, you can almost smell the chemicals on the corn.
Oh, wow.
Monsanto over here, our crops are being sprayed continually, and even before the harvest now, to quicken the harvest, they're sprayed again with Roundup. And I noticed that in one crop circle my skin became quite irritated. So personally, my skin's a sensitive type of skin anyway, and another person may not experience anything like that, but I think we need to be aware of what the chemical companies are doing to these crop circles.
Right. Well, I think they're contaminating just about everything, in addition to the crop circles, it seems like. And of course, people are getting contaminated. I still can't for the life of me figure out why this isn't banned with Monsanto. It blows my mind, that the U.S. tolerates it too. I'm just blown by that.
Yes, and I think, again, the more that people realize what they're eating and, all these chemicals going on to the corn, which is even the height of the corn has changed dramatically in the UK over the past 10 years. So some of the older crop circles seemed more gracious because the longer corn could sway around more, creating almost like a loop. Whereas today, some of the corn is so short, it's more flatter, the corn that goes down, if you see what I'm trying to describe and say. Right. So it's even changed the look of crop circles, I feel, because they're trying to get more of a corn head and less of a straw stalk. That's what they're doing over here with the wheat. It's again, it's going against nature. It's going against the grain.
It certainly is. Well, it seems like there's a lot off balance, so to speak, here on a global scale. So whatever we can do to help reset it would probably be the best thing. And that's why I like you bring awareness to the masses insofar as what we can do, techniques we can do to help assist in amplifying that versus what they're doing to try to just completely destroy things, it seems like to me. It's very sad.
Well, my heart is with the earth, so I've actually set up an agriculture experiment over the past year. It needs another year to see about, if we work with particular types of earth energies, how does that affect growth? Because again, we can live our homes within harmony with the earth, but what if we started to look at how we grow and how we manage agriculture within harmony with the earth? Could we produce as much food this way? I mean, we do need to address companies like Monsanto and say, you can do it one way, but what if we do it another way? But we do need proof of that to see if these practices actually work. And that's what I'm working with now, some alternative agricultural tests.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, just the simplicity of being kind or sending good energy to a plant, they thrive. So I would say anything that has compassion and consciousness that the life forms will pick up on in plants and the mineral kingdom and everything else. But, it seems to me like they use way too many chemicals. And, we can get started in a different area on that one. But, yeah, it's really unfortunate. And, what comes to mind also is that the elementals suffering, the nature spirits. And, we share this world on a multidimensional space. And that's something that they tend to forget, although they like to feed off of that energetic, too. So. Looks like we're going to head for a break. Maria, we'll be right back. Everybody, please stay tuned. You're listening to Ravenstar's Witching Hour. I'm Solaris BlueRaven. My wonderful guest tonight is Maria Wheatley. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.